a working session for the city council to discuss the proposed fiscal 2023 budget. We have, in addition to myself, we have committee members William Carroll and Darren Reynolds. We also have city councilman Corey Penn and Scott Jones. We have the council's attorney. We have members of the clerk is here. Chief of staff, administration, chief of staff, and other members of the administration and staff here. And then after that, we'll proceed to the other council members. So we'll start off with Mr. Carroll.
I'll wait and be as needed for any remarks. Like I stated earlier, I don't anticipate changing the budget at this point in time. I think that the conservative approach has worked for us. It's my hope that this administration will work with the council for needed funds when times are there. As I've stated to you guys, I've noticed that there's been increases in personnel costs in almost every department where those funds have gone up, where there have been positions that we could not hire or have not hired, but you put in more money there with anticipation of hiring people that we haven't been able to hire in the past. I've talked to you about economic incentive money and that money and what through this year's budget cycle and maybe in the next year. Any major changes to groups or individuals without letting them know in advance is detrimental to their budgeting process because they've already made plans for their next fiscal year's budget. I think that would be reckless, especially if they're outside entities from the city. So we just have to work our way along today and see if there are items that gain ground that need or justify changing them at this point in time. But my intent, after looking through, especially the detailed budget that I was sent, this didn't seem claim to change too much.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Reynolds.
All right, so I've got the same 5 amendments, and that's hopefully will be the topic of our discussion today. First amendment, I'm sure everybody's got a copy of these. If you'd like a copy, please let me know. Being a new council person, I've struggled with being able to, first of all, wrap my head fully around the departments and what the budget is, and figuring out what's best for my constituents, and then, in that process, we've now combined the Office of Professional Responsibility, its creation, within that budget process, where it just kind of puts my back against the wall, where I have to make snap decisions that haven't been fully considered and thought through. So my first amendment really is not to shoot down the Office of Professional Responsibility. My goal with that is simply to say, let's continue to fund them in the way that they're being funded, and set that money aside. And then let's, at a later date, very soon, but after the budget's been passed, let's have a discussion about creating this department, what its purpose is, what its function is, how it will be useful to the taxpayer, all that sort of stuff. So that's really my intent with the first amendment, and I'd be happy to sort of enter into discussions with anybody about that.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a legal question?
You want to guess?
Oh, yeah, you go for it.
Chris, is it legally possible for the council to set aside money in a line item for a department that doesn't exist?
Well, part of it is depending on how you look at it. But law, you can't create a department, all right, just on your own. You gotta have the mayor's recommendation, so get that off the table. Under section 49, after the conclusion of the public hearing, which has already happened, the council may insert new items of expenditures or increase, decrease, strike out items of expenditures. So, I guess it depends on how you look at it. If you could look at it, you're creating a new department, even though you're putting it like in an aside account, or you could look at it like, we're just creating a new bank account with nothing else to have happened yet. So, you know, you can create a new item, otherwise why would it say insert new items? What a, you know,
So that's my intent, is to basically insert a new item, but not fund a full department without getting an ordinance put forward on creating that department, establishing that department, setting that department's scope of work, you know. That's all I'm asking to reserve with this, is that process, which is laid out in our law, that it says the council, upon recommendation of the mayor, by ordinance, may create, change, and abolish offices, departments, or agencies other than the offices, departments, and agencies established or continued by this chapter, which basically tells me that a department's created by the mayor suggesting that we create it, and then us adopting an ordinance that does in fact create it. And that's all I'm trying to preserve, simply because it's too much for any of us to truly get down in the weeds and understand fully what we're doing, to do it at the same exact time as this other process of amending a budget.
So, are you saying that the mayor did not ask the council to create that department?
He did. That, yes, but he did not by way of putting an ordinance for it, he did by way of putting it in a budget as a department and an office.
But isn't that the same for Casey Calloway's department and all the other departments that have been created in that way?
No, well, the mayor does reserve the right and has the full authority, in section 39, I believe is what it is. Yes, 1144C39, they are absolutely operating within their authority by creating these other departments, because there was an ordinance passed that said, pending the passage of an ordinance or ordinances distributing the work of departments under the supervision and control of the mayor among specific divisions thereof, the mayor may establish temporary divisions. So they're within their authority to do
So
it.
is this office of professional responsibility a temporary division?
Well, I would say that if they have the budget set aside to continue to operate in a temporary capacity, then I would say, yes, they're within their rights. So, I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong or improper. They're asking for the money to operate this department either permanently or temporarily. And I'm saying if we're gonna establish a department and fund it at a rate of $1 million, we should probably consider whether or not it's exactly what we want, and do that by way of ordinance. And set aside their money, not taking anything away and saying, no, 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 just saying, let's consider this. That's all. That's all there is to it. And then, you know, we can all have the discussion about the creation of the department and move this thing on down the road.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Jones.
yeah, doesn't the entity already performing this function exist doing the capacity of work today? And they're just moving the personnel and the costs from different sections to this one budget item. Isn't that already true?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. It's already being funded, but this will give you the transparency to see exactly how much money we're spending on this department. Right now, you don't have that.
Currently, it's being funded by maybe budget shortfalls or some other means. I'm not sure exactly to pinpoint it, but there's also positions that haven't been hired yet. So if they are funding it, they're not funding at the level that's been requested. And if we want to have the line of sight to the department and and it's establishing or abolishing or changing its functions of the office, really the only way we have to do that and do it by way of ordinance is to, hold the money aside until we can establish that ordinance, which, I would expect that the mayor's office would put it forward, although we can't make them put it forward. And again, I'm not necessarily against, I think this has a useful purpose, the Office of Professional Responsibility. The Office of Professional Responsibility is a useful thing, and I think our citizens are entitled to a process where their complaints and concerns can be heard, so is our employees. I think that's all fair and good, and it's worthwhile to talk that through. It's just a matter of creating it by way of ordinance and understanding the full department responsibility, not just a narrow portion of it that is explained.
Here's my concern. If we set aside funds, we freeze those funds, correct?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you
Set it one more
If
time.
we set aside those funds, if we vote to set aside these funds until a future use and purpose, we basically freeze those funds, is that correct?
until
Where
that
they
purpose is
cannot be
established.
reallocated?
That would be my intent, until that purpose is
Okay.
established.
So the problem is, we've got people that are actively on that payroll today, and if we do that, then is there not gonna be an impact?
Yes, there will be.
And what, so we've got some things that are going on with, whether it be background checks, investigations, et cetera. If we do this, will it not stop that
Bi-weekly
work?
payroll would not occur for those positions.
Mr. Penn?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to leave in probably the next 20 minutes. But I did want to talk about, I agree with Councilman Carroll. I believe that at this point in time, when you create a budget, especially if you're preparing for the next year, as I work with nonprofit, it would be a major hit to assume that I'm about to receive this amount of money and it is taken away. But I also agree with my colleague that we have to look at our mental health and we have to do more. And so I guess my only question before I leave, what I'm kind of focused on is the Third Amendment.
Hold on. Mr. Penn has to leave. In the ordinary course of business, I think we let Mr. Reynolds complete his
I would
questions.
be happy to defer.
Would you be willing to defer to Mr. Penn?
Thank you.
Proceed, Mr. Penn.
Yeah, so with the Third Amendment, I just wanted to know what, with the reduce of transferring to Azalea City Golf Course by that amount, and maybe, sending it to VRR, would that be a problem? Or would, like, how, what's a bigger hit with the Azalea City Golf Course would that take?
Is that a question? Are you
I
asking?
mean, I don't know if anyone can,
I can provide some input, although, it would be good to hear from the administration, but, this is level funding them from last year, Azalea City Golf Course, so it's just simply flat funding them. So my expectation would be, it wouldn't be a, tremendous adjustment for them, it would just be funding them at the level of funding, but they also have an opportunity, which I've discussed several times, if there is a budget shortfall or they need additional money, they, unlike many other departments in the city, have the ability to raise their rates. The mayor can raise their rates, and then they can offset not only this shortfall, but maybe much more if they make that choice. So it's really just sort of an opportunity for them to raise their rates, to get the additional money, and maybe even more. So I don't think it would be that tremendous.
A $200,000 hit, isn't that what it is?
133.
133. I'm going back to your Office of Strategic Initiatives, this
Professional responsibility.
professional responsibilities. How much are you taking out of there?
I'm not taking anything out of Office of Professional Responsibility. Oh, yeah, 200,000 to legal and 50,000 to HR for sexual harassment. So, legal, we're already providing legal services, so I would say
Where are they
to avoid the situation that was raised about having direct impacts to staff or whatever, let's go ahead and put 200,000 aside for legal.
Where are they getting paid from now?
That's not a question.
Where are they getting paid from now? Judge Braddock and the staff, where they getting paid from?
It has changed, it originally was in city hall overhead, I think now it's in the liability account.
Liability account legal.
So it's coming out of legal,
Yes,
but you have them in this office. So if they're getting paid from legal, then they need to be under legal. So the $200,000 stays with them and goes under legal.
that's this year. But if you wanna see how much is actually spent on this department, we need to put the people working in that department in one budget item.
All right.
One budget.
I agree with that.
I agree with that.
Some of them are PD right now.
So what?
Some of them are PD right now, this year.
We're not talking about a lot of money, we're talking about a couple $100,000. And as I've already said, there's over $7 million, maybe $9 million prorated through every department for increased personnel in this coming fiscal year. You can take a prorated rate of every department and recapture that $200,000 and put it wherever you want. I've been through, this is my 9th budget cycle. If you wanna find $200,000, we can do it. That's not a lot of money. So, I would suggest, I wouldn't park that money. I mean, I would find something else to do with it. I don't think we can do that. But that may be a conversation for off record. But there's a way that you can do what you wanna do. There's a way that you can do what you wanna do, and we can move forward with this. You can find your $200,000 from VRR. You can reduce the department for what you want, put the money where you want to. You can even put more money into dog and lawnmower if you want, but they can be the budget amendments after the budget passes, or you can do it right now on an amendment where you don't know all the total consequences to what we're doing. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Carroll. And again, my intent with Amendment 1 is not to take money away from what's been requested for the Office of Professional Responsibility. It's not my intent to not fund them at a higher rate. It is, in fact, though, my intent to have the department established in the right way, at the right time, when their back's not up against the wall trying to consider a budget. It's just simply saying, hey, there's merit to this. This is something we probably ought to be doing. But we shouldn't do it at the timing that we have now. That's the purpose of this. It's not to take money away from them. It's just to set it aside so that we can have the appropriate discussion about creating a department.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Penn, did you
Yeah.
have some additional
Sorry.
concerns? you
Go ahead.
wanted to state?
Well, my question was never, we kind of moved to another subject. I know being, Councilman Reynolds, responded. I think the administration, did y'all have a response about the Azalea City Golf Course?
So, I think what, Councilman, and it's his amendment, but our preference is that you leave the departments as is, okay? But I think what Councilman Reynolds explained to me is that there is an opportunity for the Azalea City Golf Course to raise its fees and generate its own revenue. And I think that's what he's trying to push for.
Okay.
Well, can I ask another question in line with that?
Let's stay on the golf course.
No, it is about the golf.
Wait, hold on. I wanna make sure that Councilman Penn has an opportunity to make any statements or questions he may have before he has to leave.
No, that's it, thank you.
Okay.
So, Councilman Reynolds is a golfer. So, just a general golf question on courses. How often is it typical that they raise fees?
At Azalea City,
No, typical, just on average, by this week.
hard to say. I don't pay that much attention.
When's the last time Azalea City raised their fees?
It's been 15, 20 years.
Is that normal?
I would say it's abnormal.
So,
So that's, and Mr. Dave made a point earlier in the year that it serves us better and it serves them better to make an incremental adjustment rather than coming to them at one time and saying, hey guys, look, you're asking for whatever this year, $1 $1 million or whatever to run the operation. And then now we force the issue and make them raise their rates by $10 or $15 or whatever in order to fund the operation. This, of course, amendment doesn't address the rates, raising of the rates, but it sort of pushes the issue to the forefront to say, okay, what incremental change can we make with rates to offset this new, which is an additional budget increase from last year to this year? That's the idea of it. It's not to free up money for anything else, although today in our discussion, the $133,000, if we were to transfer that from Azalea City Golf Course, which we know that they have the ability to offset themselves, instead of it going to right-of-way mowing, it could certainly go to a performance contract like Veterans Recovery Resources.
I don't have a problem with that.
Me either.
And that way you're not going after Alta Point, you don't have to park the money there. They can take a pro rata share from every other department where we have increased personnel costs in there. Finding $200,000, that wouldn't be a big ask, would it? Wouldn't be a big ask?
No.
Let's find a way to do
Okay.
it. All right?
Is there,
Let's-
and I'd like to get a response from the administrator, what is the reluctance to raise the greens fees?
There hasn't been, there hasn't been a reluctance per se, it's just, there hasn't been a, I guess, urgent need or requirement, and we haven't probably kept up with what, as Councilman Reynolds pointed out, what other courses in the area have done. So, anyway, we've looked at it, we had a outside consultant, I think they briefed you all at some point on that, and we did see that we are due for an incremental raise.
We're looking at all our fees, by the way, not just
Yeah,
golf.
that's right. So fees across a lot of our parks, in places that we've never charged for a fee for something, we've also implemented some of those across our systems as well for renting certain things or reserving certain things. So those have also been starting to be implemented. Again, the city just never did that, while all of our other comparable cities or services had been for many, many years. So we're kind of easing into it, and I think an incremental raise is probably appropriate.
Do you have any idea, and probably Mr. Reynolds has done this math, how much the greens fees would have to be raised based on the current usage of the course to make up this $134,000?
We would.
I haven't made it, I didn't, I'd like to see a raise of approximately $5 per round, and they sell about 40,000 rounds a year, so that would be $200,000 in additional revenue. Although, to level fund them from the previous years where the 133 came from, so it actually is a less of a sting than it would be to go up $45. So if you take 133, 667 divided by 40,000, $3.34. So, a nominal amount, much needed adjustment, and I think the people who play golf out there would appreciate us not coming to them and saying, hey, it's gonna cost you another $15. If it's a $3 deal, it shouldn't sting too bad. And the consultant said, $3 or $4 aren't gonna really affect that.
Did you have any, Mr. Penn?
Yeah, no, I think that's that's the reason why I asked about that, because I understand the importance of taking care of something you already have, especially when you was expecting that, and based on last year's budget, we was going up, so to keep it balanced, if we increase it $3.50 to $5, that's not a big challenge, and it's for golfing, that I believe that most people wouldn't mind spending $3.50 or $5 to help VRR. I don't think that would be a big sale to say, hey guys, just adding an extra $5 is gonna benefit mental health in our city.
Yeah, but that only gets us to 138 though, we still got another 62,000.
But you gotta start somewhere.
Yep, I think that's a good starting point.
Mr. Penn, anything
And that's
else?
without reducing Alta Point.
Okay.
That's correct.
Let's keep that in mind.
Thank you, Jeff.
We're coming
Thanks, Cole.
back, Mr. Reynolds.
Yep, I've got other funding opportunities here, not just for Veterans Recovery Resources, but other things that are very much important to us in the city. Those being stump grinding, right-of-way mowing. You
It's
know,
not best.
the History Museum, what do we need to come up with?
62,000.
62,000, okay. So I haven't seen the finances of the History Museum. I don't know if they got $10 million sitting in an account somewhere. And if you recall,
No, you're not gonna go anywhere.
You're welcome to talk about it.
Well, I'm telling you right now, that's shut down. Try somewhere else. That's all.
well, I think it's important that I raised in the public eye, when we put together a budget, that things have to be considered. All things must be considered as being the highest and best use of the taxpayer money for the things that are important to everyone else. So, although my colleagues may not see it that way, and of course they've been through budget cycles time and time again, this is the way that I see it. And the way I see it is, if you're putting mental health against funding an art museum, mental health's more important. If you're funding stump grinding over additional money to an art museum, which again, we don't know their finances, I say the stump grinding's more important. Same thing for right-of-way mowing. So, you guys may be right, and I can read the room, that it doesn't sound like there's much support there, and so.
Leave the MHFDC out too.
Let's see. The other one is Amendment 2, reduce historic development personnel by $189,399 and add $189,399 to municipal enforcement. Let me explain to you why this was done. This wasn't done for any other reason than to take the council's concerns as they've been raised over the months that we've been in office and put them into a budgetary perspective. We've seen historic development, sometimes be challenging to get through, and we've also seen municipal enforcement fall short in some ways. So this is an effort to take people who do almost the same job or a very similar job, which is inspecting properties for their historical significance or components or parts, and then putting them in a report, to moving personnel, to inspecting properties and that sort of thing for their alignment with the law, and putting them in a report. And so it just seems like nobody's losing their job if they choose to move them.
You're gonna lose two people or three people in,
My assumption is 2.
yeah, the Historic Development Commission, but what you're gonna do is you're gonna shut down the tagging and photographing of the campground in Africatown and Lower MLK, so get them on a true national register, and you're gonna prevent that, and I'm not very happy with that, especially because of the area of the city that is. Those are in some of the most deprived areas of the city that have not had a chance to be on the national register. So you're gonna take that away from them and cause that to be delayed for a number of years so that you can move that money. What I would be amenable to doing is finding out what the coefficient would be to find that additional $62,000 by prorating it out through the additional employees that can't be hired within each department. I know that each department has employees that are budgeted into those departments that have a financial number. We're short $62,000, and I would be interested in knowing what percentage of each department could we take a small bit of to get this remaining $62,000. I'll be very interested in knowing that.
I don't know how that would be offered in an amendment.
You'd have to reduce each department by a certain number based on a
to come up with
prorated percentage.
come up with 66.
Prorated percentage of $62,000. What percentage of each department in the city would get us to $62,000? Take the total number of employee costs per department and divide it by 62,000. That gives you a percentage number. Then take that percentage from each department, and it gives us the 62,000, which isn't very much money from each department.
Some departments,
Some departments, say again?
are too slow to actually take from them, but why don't you let us come back with a recommendation to get you to where you wanna be?
We have to vote on this Tuesday.
I know.
All right, and if we do that, then I'd be willing to leave the rest of it alone. Let it stay the way it is.
What do you mean?
I find myself in a position not wanting to support all of your amendments. I'm okay with the one that I said I was okay with, but the others, you might find a lot of fierce opposition. from-
Well, let's talk about number 5 then.
Let's go, can we go back to the Historical Development Commission?
Yeah.
In the Historical Museum as well, it's the same point for both. We find ourselves in a position where we've had a very lucrative period. We've had a lot of excess revenue. And we're using that revenue, as you have stated at the beginning of this, on really building up our personnel force and structure in the city. There's going to come a time where we're gonna see that pendulum swing back. And I've been through those times where the first cuts made are personnel cuts, because that's an easy target. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that if we cut a position, priority things that are happening are going to get cut. I just don't. I think that's an easy statement to try and safeguard that funding. But I think if the documenting of certain artifacts and historical documents, et cetera, is a priority, which I believe it is, even if you cut that position too, they're gonna rearrange the priorities to make sure those tasks get accomplished, because I've seen that get done. When we've always heard the term, do more with less, that came from a point in time where we got cut 30, 40, 50% in departments, and we still had to maintain the same work outputs with that reduced staff. We haven't had to do that in the last however many years in this city, because we've seen that continue to grow. And I just want to keep that in the back of our minds. We're at the start of a recession. And the thought of the fact that we keep growing and growing and growing on personnel, there's going to come a point in time where we've got to reverse that trend. And it's going to be difficult, it's going to be hard, and everything that we're doing right now is going to carry additional budget costs every year after this one. That 400,000 is every year after this one, et cetera, et cetera. And OPR, every year after this, there's another million. So we've just got to be extremely cognizant of that fact, and I think every one of the administration departments need to understand, if we continue to see a path of recession coming down, those personnel hits are going to come in the future, and it could be in the life cycle of this council. So I think that we need to be very cognizant of that as well.
I would just like to point out that in 2013, when the mayor took office, current mayor took office, we were in the sort of back end of one of the worst recessions in the history of the country. And Mayor Jones and Mayor Simpson worked it out so that the city never laid off anything. Now, the head count was reduced by 300, I believe, at one point. Isn't that right, Mr. Barber?
Yes, sir.
The head count went down by
Through
some
attrition.
300 individuals, but that's all through attrition.
That's right.
It's all through attrition. Now, it's conceivable that we could enter into a recession that was worse than that. But I would say that's possible, but not probable. So I think both the prior administration and the current administration have shown an aptitude to manage through recessions without laying folks off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was the chair of the finance committee during that time. It was probably one of the hardest periods that we ever had to go through. Furloughs were talked about, layoffs were talked about, reduction in pay to staff and committees, but we sat right at the head of the table and made sure, along with the administration, Jim, you were involved in that, make sure that we did not take that route. So I'm sure that whatever comes before the city, that we can find a way to make things work. And that's why in my mind, I kind of looking at the budget again. That $62,000 is found if the administration comes back to us with a simple reduction in line items for the employees that will not be hired for the next year, and we can give that extra $62,000 to come up with $200,000 for VRR. And then, I'm fine with that after that, and I can leave the rest of these amendments.
I think you have a commitment from the chief of staff,
I see.
$62,000. I'd also like to say, the fact that the fact that we have such a strong reserve would again help us, to get through any recession well. It's important, and, you know, from my own personal perspective, I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to maintain a very strong reserve.
All right, the Fifth Amendment, this is one that I thought there was pretty good consensus, it was actually brought to me, is to reduce the transfer to capital fund by $1 million and to create a new line item for ditch maintenance for $1 million. Reduce economic incentive by $1 million. And this is a pretty straightforward thing, you know, again, we talked about this one at length last week, that this is a way for us to show our priority, what we want to have happen, where we're falling short. Of course, everybody's aware that we're falling short, the administration has acknowledged that, and I think they're fine with this amendment. And I would hope that everyone else would get behind it, to fund immediate ditch maintenance issues. $1 million again, not enough, and it likely will never be enough, but it moves more than a grain of sand, as my colleague from two said last week, that it wouldn't even remove a grain of sand. It certainly will, in my opinion. So I think that was the easiest one.
The administration's good with
With what, the last one?
it. The last one.
Well,
It's the only one.
the question I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
No, I'm fine, go ahead.
It's still using capital funds for an operational use.
No.
It's, general fund money that we were going to transfer in that won't be needed for economic incentive until later, beyond 2023. So, it's okay to reduce the transfer.
I see what you're
Well-
saying. It's a reduction of, it's a
From general
reduction of
fund.
a transfer to capital.
That's correct.
Right.
Are we gonna need,
But if you're gonna need it, in 24, then how are you gonna replace that revenue?
So, we were scheduled to do FY 2024 at 2.5 million for economic incentive, and these are for the upcoming commitments by the city.
to Airbus?
So we'll have to increase it next year during the cycle to 3.5 instead of 2.5.
Okay, so if the million, is that gonna be if this is done, $1 million is kept in the general fund, is the idea to use independent contractors to perform the
Yes, sir.
work?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay,
Earmarked for that purpose.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Whatever you guys wanna do, but, you know, again, they're never gonna get to it. I don't care how much money's over there. I mean, it's not a money issue, it's a personnel issue. And no matter how much money you put over there, I don't think they can hire enough people within the city with the right equipment that can even do the tasks that we're talking about. And especially for the ditches that run in districts 1, 2, and 3 that aren't just drainage swells and have concrete in them, or riprap that have foreman lace barbed holdings where there's structural cleaning. You know, it'll take you $1 million. You'd never it's not gonna work. I mean, John Bell tried it, you know, we tried it in two cycles before. I mean, this is, to me, you're just trying to reinvent the wheel that I've already seen roll 2 or 3 times already. So, I mean, I just can't support it, and I'm just gonna be honest with you, simply because I lived through it twice
When I was in high school.
when you're in high school.
Look, we gotta do something. And this earmarks funds, it doesn't depend on the city's personnel, it's why we're subcontracting it out. The majority of the issue has been, we haven't been able to get after this with the people, be it contract delays or stalls or whatever. So it does get after it. I guarantee you, there's things in my district, that $1 million, we can get after it with from some contracts, so I'm all for it.
Well, again, I think that if we're gonna put it over there, let's use it in the districts that really need the help. You know, and
My
like,
last one.
I saw that ditch that was, excuse me, I saw the drainage swell that was, presented.
Let's talk about what we're gonna spend it.
I hear you, but you know, I won't make that point. I won't make
That was
that
just
point.
when I-
Let's not
that's
argue
just
about what we're
one.
gonna spend it. Mr.
And
Reynolds,
that's not it.
you got any more questions, statements?
I will make it just a general statement, that I think the, Azalea City Golf Course is a first-rate golf course, and they operate better than any golf course in the city, in my opinion, and I play a bit of golf out there. And their team should be commended for all the hard work that they do. And, this amendment is in no way a shot at them, because they do an exceptional job. It's just trying to get, what's worth out of their great work. And same thing with the historic development personnel. The historic development personnel has proven that they do a great job in preservation for the city. It's just a matter of getting my priorities aligned with everyone else's. So it sounds like there's an agreement, or at least generally, not amongst a supermajority, because we don't know that, to transfer the Azalea City Golf Course over to VRR, a performance contract. There's gonna be some discussion after this, it appears from the administration, to figure out how to fund that the rest of the way, $66,000,
62,000.
whatever, 62,000. And it sounds like there may be agreement on the transfer to capital, $1 million to start the process of right-of-way mowing. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, just one more comment. Thanks for this committee's work and trying to find the funding for the mental health piece. I think that's commendable, and I definitely appreciate it. I would ask the administration for those performance contracts that fall under mental health, that those fall underneath the oversight of our resiliency officer, so we have accountability of the actions within those performance contracts and make sure that they get done, would be my only request. Thank you.
Can we have some type of written structure of this before Tuesday sent out to us, please?
Yeah, I'll make these actually haven't been offered on the floor yet, so I will just change the wording on Azalea City, and then based on the discussion we have with
The administration will do their end before
Yeah.
Tuesday, right? So,
I'm gonna try to do it today.
everybody happy with this? Joe?
Just a couple of things. On the performance contracts, Mr. Kilgore, recall that in past years, we used to have a more robust system of handling performance contracts, and those seeking performance contracts would come to the council and make their case. What happened was that we went through that entire exercise and there were no changes. There would be no changes. And sometime in the past, either the first term I served or the second term I served, I suggested that we have a very robust process for looking at performance contracts that would start early in the fiscal year in preparation for the prior year. The applications, we'd start taking applications in the first quarter of the fiscal year. And that we would have people come in and that everybody would be zero-based. Everybody made an application. Just because you got something last year didn't mean you get something this year. You start from zero, and the best way to do it is project-based. But what I'm suggesting is probably way too controversial and for this council. But to me, every project-based grants are the best grants you can make, because you know exactly how the money is going to be spent, and you can determine afterwards whether they delivered what they said they were gonna deliver. So, if the council's interested in this, I'm perfectly willing to have a completely new performance contract operation. I think we can put it together.
I'm absolutely fine with that, and that is the way it used to be done. Also, CDBG used to be done the same way, where, people requesting funds from CDBG would come to us under the same precedents. And now the council somehow or another has been willed out of that process. So I'm totally in favor of going back to the old way of doing this. It gives the council more insight to where the money's coming from in the budget, how it's being spent by the actual people performing the contracts, and whether or not they're worthy of funding in the next year. So I'm absolutely fine with that, Mr. Chairman. Please put forth the resolution bill.
Okay. The only other thing I'd say is I'm remain skeptical on the $1 billion deal, because for the same reasons that he stated.
Matter of fact, I don't know if this is appropriate right now, but at some point, I think the administration needs to give the council an update on what's happening out at the airport in the process, and where they are in, reletting or re-advertising the request for proposals for A&E work on the municipal airport, and also where they are in the process and how they're gonna handle it. But this might not be the appropriate meeting, but at some time, the council needs to be given an update on that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.